as you looked at me. Cocked your head to the side and said, I'm angry.
The Bare Naked Ladies became one of rock's most unlikely success stories in the fall of '98. Their clever comic single, One Week, became the top song in America, proving their quirky individualism had mass appeal.
Like Kurosawa, I make mad films. Okay, I don't make films, but if I did, they'd have a samurai.
They're not like every other band. The Bare Naked Ladies are special.
The Canadian quintet matched their innovative songwriting style with groundbreaking live shows, mixing catchy riffs with comic relief and wowing crowds with a high-octane mix of rap, rock, and riotous cover tunes.
What makes BNL such a great live band is that you never really know what to expect.
Disc one, it's where we've begun. It's all my greatest hits.
They convert you in the audience. That's what starts with them. You go to see the Bare Naked Ladies live, you just go away thinking, man, that was a lot of fun.
It took a decade of stomach-churning turns on the rock and roll roller coaster, but at the end of '98, the Bare Naked Ladies were at an all-time high.
If I had $1 million, we wouldn't have to eat Kraft dinner.
But we would. We're selling hundreds of thousands of records. Every time we go on stage, people scream when we're popular.
But what should have been the happiest time of their lives was overshadowed by the life-threatening illness of best friend and keyboardist Kevin Hearn. As the Bare Naked Ladies crisscrossed the country, playing to sold-out crowds, Kevin lay in a hospital bed, fighting for his life against leukemia.
Kev has been working as a musician for 15 years straight. And now, after slugging it out and living in rooming houses and whatever else, his moment comes and he's in a hospital bed.
A lot of times I was angry and why me, and I was never jealous of them.
The Bare Naked Ladies had taken the last step on the road to success without Kevin, but they vowed they would never leave him behind.
It's like, you know what, we're waiting. I can't imagine doing anything else but waiting for him. He's in the band.
The band's devotion is based on friendship, with bonds as deep as any brotherhood. At its core, co-founders Stephen Page and Ed Robertson, two self-proclaimed geeks who grew up just blocks apart in a suburb of Toronto, Canada. Born in 1970, Stephen Page was a shy and introspective child, more interested in songs than in sports.
At that point, I was a skinny little kid, and I had, I ran with my knees out, and horrible, the last picked for every sport.
I think he played soccer for 3 years until I finally realized he'd never even touched the ball. He purposely figured out how he could run around after the ball and never really come in contact with it.
But if Stephen was lacking in brawn, he had more than enough brains. After skipping first grade, he was sent to a school for gifted children, one that Ed Robertson joined a few years later.
I was quite geeky. I definitely didn't fit in my public school. I transferred to this program, and it was like a whole class full of kids that were as geeky and ostracized as me. So I made friends pretty quickly there.
A grade apart, the boys didn't know each other yet, but both would become obsessed with music.
I remember my grade 5 teacher, Mrs. McDonald. Her husband was in a Canadian rock band called the Mad Cats, and he came in and spoke to the class, and I think that made a huge impression on me. There was no question for me. I was going to be a musician.
From then on, when he wasn't playing video games, Ed was jamming in garage bands, while Stephen spent his teenage years singing in choirs and writing silly songs with fellow misfits.
They call me chicken legs, they call me pork fries, they call me fatso, they call me buckwheat.
My parents would go away for the weekend. We'd get a bucket of KFC and like 4 beers, and then we'd rent this 4-track and record crap.
This is me, great night, baby.
One of Stephen's tapes eventually found its way into the hands of Ed Robertson, but the two didn't really bond until the summer of 1988. Stephen was 18, Ed 17, when they both volunteered as counselors at a summer music camp.
when I started hanging out with Steve a bit at music camp, and you know, I already knew some of the songs he'd written. He thought that was pretty cool.
I was flattered and very impressed. The other thing that impressed me is as soon as I started singing with him, he had a perfect ear for harmony. So the two of us could just sing together easily.
By the time summer camp ended, Stephen and Ed were inseparable.
I'd go over to Ed's parents' house and we'd sit there and like make up songs or watch TV or eat chicken or whatever, eat macaroni.
Hi!
I just thought, this guy Eddie is the coolest guy I've ever met.
In the fall of 1988, after a few months of practicing together in private, the two booked their first public appearance at an outdoor benefit concert at Toronto City Hall.
I called Steve and said, hey, I got a gig next weekend. Do you want to do it with me?
It's like, okay. And he said, I told them we're called Bare Naked Ladies. I said, you what?
It was like, Bare Naked Ladies.
It was what we used to say when we were kids. You find a Playboy in the bushes or something, or you see your friend's sister changing, and you know you're not supposed to. It's that taboo thing, and they're called Bare Naked Ladies.
So we said, okay, we'll meet behind the stage before we go on, and we'll get there an hour before, and we'll figure it out. And we just got up and had a lot of fun. And because we only knew 2 or 3 songs, we made up the rest.
I said to my friend Stephen Page, excuse me, sir, but what is your age? Because I'm going to start a band that's something like Menudo.
By now, Stephen was a college freshman studying English at York University. Ed was still a high school senior. But pretty soon they were skipping school and playing in small clubs around Toronto. Paul Myers was an early fan.
Their very first gigs were like, they didn't have songs. They would say, we need to do another song now. Who's got an idea for a song? You know, someone would say, my hair, and he'd start singing, my hair, and then that's where the rapping came from.
Well, Shaggy said to Velma, hey now, Velma, how you doing? And Velma said, Jinky Shaggy, I'm fine. Ruby Shacks?
Audiences loved the comical lyrics and catchy tunes, and at the end of '88, the Bare Naked Buddies signed on as an opening act for a roaming musical comedy troupe called Corky and the Juice Pigs.
I thought, well, probably best to let him go ahead and do it, because they'll be playing in grungy clubs all over Canada, and he'll come home and he'll have had a terrible time, and he'll go back to school and things will be great.
But the road trip only solidified Stephen's feelings that he had found a home in the spotlight.
I mean, getting on stage is, I always say it's the most natural thing I can do. It's the one place in life where I'm scared of nothing.
Like another fries, a quarter pounder with cheese, around the light in your eyes. Where you go out with me, please.
The two friends abandoned college careers and continued playing gigs as a duo until December '89, when they invited hometown friends Andy and Jim Cregan to join them at a club in Toronto.
And they had a Christmas time show that they invited me and Andy to play at. And I mean, I'd already been going to these little gigs they were doing and was a total fan at that point.
We had them up just more as a joke, because we weren't a band. It was me and Ed, and we always would joke about the band or whatever, and there'd be no band there.
But Andy's congo playing and Jim's double bass brought a whole new edge to the Bare Naked sound.
Like from the first note, Ed and I just looked at each other and went, this is it, this is the band.
The four friends forged a deep bond. But in 1990, after playing to packed clubs for just 6 months, Andy packed his own bags and headed to South America for a high school student exchange program. The leftover ladies were suddenly on the lookout for another drummer. That summer, they met 22-year-old Tyler Stewart, another talented musician who'd experienced life as an outcast.
I always stood out as being a little different, you know. There's some hilarious photos of me with like a giant afro and, you know, there's sort of blonde-haired, blue-eyed family. I started to ask questions like, why are some of the kids, you know, calling me the N-word or whatever? You know, why do I feel different?
For years, Tyler says his mother refused to answer his questions about their past. Finally, Tyler's relentless curiosity wore her down.
I found out when I was about 12 years old, I guess, that I had a biological father who's black.
Knowing the truth didn't make life easier. Tyler's teen years were a whirlwind of adolescent turmoil, but he felt truly at ease when he started jamming with Ed, Stephen, and Jim. As a bare naked lady, Tyler was another gifted misfit who finally fit in.
I really liked them because they were like me. They were gregarious and they were intelligent and subversive too in a wholesome way, you know.
In early 1991, the multi-talented Andy Cregan returned to the band and moved to the keyboards. And that winter, the Bare Naked Ladies embarked on their first full-fledged Canadian road tour.
Hello city, hello city, hello city.
It's kind of the Canadian band rituals. You have to tour the country in February or January in a van.
Those days were exciting. I remember just not sleeping the whole first tour, rooming with Tyler and just like staying up late and sleeping as the car took us to the next gig.
After each show, the ladies sold copies of a homemade 5-song cassette. It wasn't long before they had an underground hit with the song Brian Wilson, a tribute to the brilliant but reclusive Beach Boy.
Lying in bed, just like Brian Wilson did.
For the Bare Naked Ladies, it seemed like stardom was just around the corner.
So when we started to get popular in Toronto, I just said, okay, we're gonna get signed now. And I was so naive about that. I just assumed that, okay, you get popular, you're signed.
Next, the Bare Naked Ladies get banned.
My phone's ringing off the hook. Have you heard about this? Have you heard? We were the poster boys for political correctness gone awry.
And later, the group struggles to stay together.
I started to doubt, the validity of what we were doing.
When Behind the Music continues.